We're starting a new series tonight called Eris. And now listen, like I told you last week, this does not have anything to do with Taylor Swift. Okay? I'm just telling you that now. Sorry, ladies. I know you're like, oh, I thought we were just going to watch Taylor Swift all night. That is not going to happen. Listen, I want you to understand, by the end of this series, I want you to understand some of the incredible women that are in the Bible. And that's what we're going to be focused on over the next several weeks, is we're going to talk about the matriarchs of the Bible. Ladies of the women of the Bible and why they were important. What was their purpose? But I want you to understand something before we get into this. I want you to understand what Eris actually means. It does not mean the Taylor Swift concert. Taylor Swift did not invent the word Eris, okay? And so I just want to kind of throw that out there now. That is not what this is about. And she did not invent the word. Let me tell you what the definitions are for Eris, okay? Eris is a moment in time of a significant event or place, okay? That's what era means. So era is a particular time. It's a significance in time. Let me tell you what in Hebrew, what Eris means. Eris means a guardian, mother, or significant person in time. Okay, did you hear that? Eris means a guardian, a mother, or a significant person in time. So that's why when we're going to talk about the matriarchs, when we're going to talk about the women of the Bible that were significant and what they did and how did they impact Jesus' ministry, that's why it's called Eris. That's why this whole series is going to be focused, and why it's called Eris is because we're going to talk about who these women were. They were guardians, they were mothers, and they were significant in biblical times. So that's what we're going to talk about. Over the next several weeks, we're going to focus on the significance of these women. Okay, so tonight we're going to start out with Sarah. We're going to focus on Sarah and what is her story. Next week, we're going to take a short break. We're going to take a break from this, and we're actually going to talk about Valentine's because, of course, Valentine's is on Wednesday this year. And so we're actually going to have a conversation on relationships. And so that's going to be next week. But then we're going to pick this series back up, and we're going to talk about Rebecca. Rebecca is going to be the second week, is who we're going to talk about. Rebecca, and then we're going to talk about Leah, and then last we're going to talk about Rachel. Okay, these are the four women that we're going to talk about. So why are we doing this? And I'm going to continue coughing because I do still have a cough, so I do apologize. So many times in here, we focus on the disciples, right? We focus on the significance of the disciples. We focus on the people that are around Jesus. That's what we learn about. That is always our center focus. And the end goal is always to point you to the cross. With any message that we have here, my goal is always to say, okay, we're going to end at the cross. You're going to see why that story or why this conversation is so important and why it ends with the cross. And so this is different in the ways that we're not going to be talking about the disciples. We're not going to be talking about a story of like this is a man and this is what he did. We're going to talk about the women of the Bible because whether they direct impacted Jesus' ministry or indirectly impacted Jesus' ministry. There's a reason why they're in the Bible, and they have such significant stories. And I believe it's important for us to understand and to learn about them. And so that way we can say, wow, her story connects with me. Or her story really impacted me. Or I didn't know about her story. Some of them you may have never heard, like Leah. You may never have heard about Leah and what her story is. You may never have heard about Sarah. And tonight, by the end of this, you're going to say, okay, I know who Sarah is. And I know why her story is so important. See, I want you to understand, growing up, I've told you this before, growing up, before my mom remarried, she was a single mother, and she took care of my brother and I, and she worked 3 jobs just to support us. I saw a woman that was so hardworking, and she just wanted to take care of her family all the time. And so that's what I grew up with. I grew up with always respecting women and understanding that they're strong and they can lead a family, because that was my role model growing up. And so for me, whenever I look at this, whenever I look at these women, I say, yeah, they can absolutely lead. And they have made an impact. They made an impact on Jesus' ministry. Even in the Old Testament, they still made an impact in Jesus' ministry because it's a story. And so that's what we're going to focus on tonight. But before we do that, as always, let's go ahead and pray. Heavenly Father, I thank you for tonight. God, I thank you for these stories that we're going to learn about. God, I thank you for these strong women of the Bible. And God, just how their stories impacted Jesus' ministry. And God, I thank you for allowing us to be able to read and to understand and to focus on these women. And God, I pray that right now that you would allow us to be able to set aside any thoughts that we may have, anything that we may be thinking in our head, like, well, I don't know who this woman is, or I don't know why is this significant. God, I pray that we'd have an open mind. We'd be completely open to what you have to tell us through the stories and how these women can impact us. And God, I pray that once again, you just allow us to be focused on you, and at the end of tonight that we can point the students to the cross through the stories of these women. God, we love you, and we thank you so much for everything you're doing. In your name we pray. Amen. All right. So, I always actually start out with a question. So my question tonight, have you ever been in a near impossible situation that you saw no solution from? Have you ever been in a situation where you're like, I don't know how I'm going to get out of this? Have you ever been in a situation where you're like, you know what, I am doomed. I have no idea what the end result is going to be, but I can only imagine it's going to be bad. It's something that you see that there's no way out, and that you believe, okay, this is going to be a bad situation for me, and because one, you did something wrong, or two, you were accused of something, and you're thinking, I have no idea how I'm going to get past this. I want you to start thinking this way tonight as we go into the story of Sarah. I want you to think about this idea of being in a situation that seems impossible, that you're going to be able to get out of. So when I was in school, when I was writing this message, I stopped and I was thinking about this, about being in an impossible situation, a situation that I could not control. So whenever I was in high school, I came home one day and my mom and my stepdad were sitting at the kitchen table, and they had a letter in front of them, and they said, Scott, we need to talk to you about this letter. And so I sat down at the table, and they said, can you please explain to me why we got a letter from the school stating that you were caught with drugs at school and that you were also giving it out to your friends? This letter stated this very clear, and it said that myself and my parents had to go to the school the next day, and that we had to face the district and we had to face the principal, and they wanted to find out what was going on because they were going to press charges. And it freaked me out. I will tell you, I did not sleep that night because my parents interrogated me for hours, honestly. My mom and my stepdad, we sat there and they're like, you need to tell us what's going on. You need to tell us what's wrong and what happened, because we're going to go to bat for you. We're going to be in your corner, but we need to make sure that whatever you did, that we know the full story. And so we went to school, and you need to understand, my school was a very large school. And I had never really had a conversation with the principal. And so we went in. I remember walking into the principal's office, and we sat down. And this whole time, I'm thinking, I have no idea how I'm going to get out of this. I have no idea. This is impossible for me, because I'm thinking, at this point, they have evidence, of course. They have something that is pointing at me, and I don't know how I'm going to get out of this. And so the principal started talking, and he's like, this is a very serious situation. And he said, you were accused of having drugs in school. A teacher saw you, and they also saw you giving the drugs out to someone else. And he said, can you please tell me, Scott Eckerd, why this is the case. And he said, because Scott Eckerd was seen doing this. I'm sitting there and I'm like, Eckerd. And he kept on saying this over and over again. And he said, we actually have you on camera. It's shocking, but a short guy with black hair and glasses was doing this in the gym. And he's like, we have this. And he said, we know it was you, Scott Eckerd. I was like, can we take a time out here? I said, my name is Scott Eckenrode. And he like kind of sat back in his chair. He's like, this is Scott Eckerd that did this. I said, well, that's not me. I was like, hold on a second. I didn't do this. And my parents were like, hold on, do you have proof that it was him? And they're like, well, yeah, short guy, black hair, glasses. I had glasses at the time. And his name is Scott. And my mom's like, yeah, but there's 600 students in his class. So was it really him? Do you know that it was Scott Eckenrode? And he's like, no. He's like, it was Scott Eckerd. Make a long story short, they had the wrong guy. They had been accusing me of doing this, and I didn't do it. This Scott Eckerd, he got in trouble, and he was the one that they were looking for. Well, the principal apologized profusely and was like, I'm so sorry. Meanwhile, I'm like hyperventilating on the floor because for me, I'm like, oh my goodness, like I thought for sure that I was in trouble, even though I did not do anything. Even though I've never done drugs in my life, I'm still thinking in my mind, there is no way I'm going to get out of this. I'm in an impossible situation. I'm in a situation that I don't know how I'm going to get out of it, let alone be able to tell my parents. And like I'm trying to explain to my parents that I did nothing wrong. And they're sitting there looking at it and saying, I don't believe you. Because we have a letter in front of us that's stating that you did this. And so that was my impossible situation. I've had many impossible situations, but whenever I was writing this, I thought that is one that I would say was very impactful to me. Because I saw no way out. I saw absolutely no way out that I was going to be able to get out of this and that I was going to be okay. See, we all face things in our life that seem impossible to overcome. If you haven't, buckle up. Because it's going to happen. We all face it. If we're not careful, it can easily get us in the mindset that there is no hope, that there is no way out. And tonight we're going to unpack the story of Sarah, and we're going to see that God made the impossible possible. God allowed her to be able to fulfill something that she felt that God had told her when she was younger that was going to happen. So, as we focus on this, I want you to remember one thing. I want you to think about one question. Are you believing God for something that feels impossible? That is the question that I want you to remember tonight. Are you believing God for something that feels impossible? Because I can tell you right now, this is exactly where Sarah was. Sarah was at the point where she's like, I don't really know if I can believe what God told me. And so I want you to keep this in mind when we focus on Sarah. And I want to show you this. This is a representation of Sarah. This is who scholars say that she looked like. And this is her husband, Abraham. And the reason why I'm showing you this, because I believe it's important that as we focus on Sarah tonight, that you have a visual of what Sarah may have looked like. Because we're going to learn about Sarah. We're going to learn about this woman of the Bible. And I believe that this allows us to be able to look in her eyes. This allows us to be able to see this woman, this matriarch, and to be able to understand that, that she was a real woman, that this really happened, and that this story impacted her in a mighty way, but also impacted many people around her. So I want you to keep that in mind. Look at her. Look in her eyes. See that she's real. So my question for you tonight Do you believe that there's anything impossible for God to achieve? Do you believe there's anything in your life that you're like, you know what, that's beyond God. God cannot handle that. God, you know what, God, you can do a lot, but I don't think you can do this. I want you to read, first of all, who has the Bible? I want to see it. Raise your Bible. Good. I love this. I will tell you, every week I'm seeing more and more Bibles. I love that. That is awesome to be able to see. I want you to open up to Matthew 19, verse 26. Matthew 19, verse 26. Matthew 19, verse 26. It says, Jesus looked at them intently and said, first of all, he looked at the disciples. He was talking to the disciples at this time. He said, humanly speaking, it is impossible. But with God, everything is possible. Humanly speaking, it is impossible. But with God, everything is possible. I want you to understand the fact that nothing is impossible. No situation or limitation. Nothing is impossible for God. There is not one thing that he says, oh, you know what, you got me. You got me. I can't do that. You know what? You have me. There is not one thing that is beyond God's control. Nothing is impossible. Nothing is impossible, or nothing will limit his ability to fulfill his purpose. God will fulfill his purpose. God will speak into whatever you're dealing with. God will help you to be able to get through whatever you need because he can. So I want to set this up because I believe that when we're talking about the idea of Sarah, when we're talking about this idea is seeing an impossible situation, first of all, I want you to understand Sarah was 90 years old at the time of this story. 90 years old. Keep that in mind. She longed for a child. That's what she wanted. She longed for a child. And in Genesis 12, you don't have to go there. Genesis 12, God had made a covenant with her husband, Abraham. We're not going to go there. We could go down a long trail for tonight. But he gave a covenant to Abraham. And he said, the Lord said, I will make you into a great nation because of your descendants. This is what God told Abraham many, many years ago. And now Abraham is 100 years old, and Sarah is 90 years old. And he's still looking at this and saying, okay, God, you said that I was going to have a nation full of descendants, that I was going to make a great nation out of my descendants. Where are you? What is happening? Because at this point, God, my wife is 90, I'm 100. Yeah, I'm not sure how this works anymore. I want you to read the story. We're going to start in Genesis 18, so you can turn there. Genesis 18, we're going to read 9 through 14. So there were 3 men that came to visit Abraham and Sarah. And they sat down by their tent, and they had a conversation with Abraham. And the story begins, and he says, one of the men says, where is Sarah, your wife? The visitor asked. She's inside the tent, Abraham replied. Then one of them said, I will return to you about this time next year, and your wife Sarah will have a son. Sarah was listening to this conversation from the tent. Abraham and Sarah were both very old by this time, and Sarah was long past the age of having children. So she laughed silently to herself and said, How could a worn out woman like me enjoy such pleasure, especially when my master, my husband, is so old? Then the Lord said to Abraham, why did Sarah laugh? Why did she say, can an old woman like me have a baby? Is anything too hard for the Lord? I will return about this time next year, and Sarah will have a son. Sarah was afraid, so she denied it. Saying, I didn't laugh. But the Lord said, no, you did laugh. No, you laughed. So I want to set this scene up for you. Sarah's inside the tent. The three men come and visit. One of them is the Lord. And he's sitting here saying, okay, you know what? Your wife, Sarah, is going to have a baby. And you need to be prepared for this. And she's inside, and she's like, that's not going to happen. She laughs, and she says, there's no way that this worn out body can do that. There's no way that I'm going to be able to have a baby. And then the Lord asked her, why did you lie? And she says, I didn't laugh. She says, I didn't laugh. Like, that wasn't me. I didn't laugh. And the Lord said, no, you did. You did laugh. You did laugh. So to kind of give you a background of Sarah, she was known as being very beautiful. Okay? I want you to understand that. So much that kings and men around her wanted to marry her. This was something that she was very beautiful. And it says it in the Bible that Sarah was extremely beautiful. And this may get a little weird, but she was the half-sister of her husband, Abraham. Different time. I know, it's awkward. But they had the same father, but they had different mothers. And Abraham feared for his life because Sarah was so beautiful. So he would tell the kings and the men around him, oh, she's my sister. So that way he didn't get murdered, because at that time, somebody like Sarah that was that beautiful, they'd be like, you know what? Let's cut out the middleman. Let's cut out the husband, and we'll take her as their wife. And so Abraham said, no, you know what? She's my sister instead. And so I don't want to go down a rabbit trail, because as I was writing this message, honestly, I'm like, man, I could tell you about this. I could tell you about that. Why is their name different in the beginning of Genesis? And why is it different now? Like, I could go down this rabbit trail, but I really just want to focus on Sarah. I want to focus on this idea of the fact that God said that he will make a great nation out of their descendants, and that affected Sarah. But I think it's interesting that whenever the Lord told Abraham that Sarah was going to have a child, that she laughed. She laughed because, it was not impossible, but it was very unlikely. I want you to think for a second, your grandmother, okay? Your grandmother, your great-grandmother, 90 years old, and she comes to you and says, hey, guess what? I'm going to have a baby. You're like, okay, probably not. This is weird. So I want you to think about that. That chances are it's very unusual. And so it makes a lot of sense as to why she laughed, right? It makes a lot of sense why she said, I don't understand how this body, this worn out body, can do that. I don't get it. And why she laughed about it. In this verse, she lied to the Lord and she said, I didn't laugh. But the Lord said, no, you did laugh. And so what I think is funny, though, is because the Lord said, you're going to have a son, and I want you to call him Isaac. Guess what the word Isaac means in Hebrew? Laughter. So she's denying laughing, but yet if you look at the word Isaac in Hebrew, it means laughter. And so that's what Isaac's name meant. And so the Lord said, you know what? Because you lied to me, because you said I didn't laugh, well, now I want you to name your son after me, or after laughter, so that way every time you say, Isaac, come here, you're going to remember the time that you You lied to the Lord. So there's so much to unpack with this story. So much. I mean, honestly, I could spend 3 weeks talking about this. But she was also known for being the mother of Israel because she did have a son named Isaac. And Isaac had 2 sons, Jacob and Esau, and they became great rulers of Israel. And so they began Israel. And just one thing I want to tell you about this is God had changed Sarah's name from Sarai to Sarah. And the reason why is because Sarai means princess. Sarai means princess. Sarah means princess to many. And so God was setting her up to be the mother of a great nation. Even though she denied it, even though she thought there's no way that this could happen, because Israel was born out of her. Literally, Israel was born out of her. Nothing is impossible. She died at the age of 127. God showed up in a way that was clearly impossible in her life. She did not expect to have a child at 90 years old. Sarah's story should be a reminder to us today that nothing is too big for the Lord. So why is Sarah's story important? Why is this story so important? Why is a 90-year-old woman's story relevant to us today? God promised her something that seemed impossible at the time. God told her that she was going to have a child, and it was almost impossible. She thought there's no way that that's going to happen. Yet she would have never dreamed that the blessing that would come from her and how many people would be impacted. How thousands of years later, you and I are still talking about Israel. That we could still say Israel is a physical place. Israel, the Israelites are still there. We could still say that we still see this great nation. And it came from her. It came because she believed and she trusted in the Lord. Yes, she laughed because she thought this is impossible. But she still believed. The thing I want you to understand is she could only see what her current situation was, the fact that she's just old. So nothing else made sense to her other than that. There was nothing else that she could sit here and say, okay, you know what, I can buy into that. Nothing else made sense other than the fact that she's just sitting here saying, I'm old, so this is my current situation, so nothing else makes sense other than this. Sound familiar? Because I think for each and every one of us, we could sit there and say, nothing else makes sense right now other than the situation that I'm in, and the situation doesn't look good for me, or that I'm going to have to deal with something, or that there's going to be consequences that are going to come on me, and I don't know how I'm going to handle it, and I don't know where I'm going to put my trust, and I don't know how I'm going to be overcome this in the future. Because we can all look at this and we say, you know what, we don't believe that this is actually, we're going to be able to overcome it. We don't believe that the impossible is possible. I want you to read where is it? Come on. There we go. Hebrews 11:11. So this is in the New Testament. So this is beyond Sarah. In the New Testament, it says, it was by faith that even Sarah was able to have a child. Though she was barren and was too old, she believed that God would keep his promise. And so a whole nation came from this one man and woman who was as good as dead. A nation so many people that the stars in the sky and the sand on the seashore, there's no way to count them. This came from Sarah and from Abraham. This nation that you cannot even count the amount of people that are in it came from Sarah and Abraham. The promise of Sarah still applies to us today because God is still faithful, God is still possible, God is still in every situation that we're dealing with. He never failed. God's word never fails, not once. Throughout the scriptures, there's been many people that have come to Christ because they have tried to debunk the scriptures. They've tried to take the Bible and said, well, no, hold on. There's something inaccurate here. And then they find out, no, that's not really true. There's been many people that have come to the saving grace of Jesus Christ because they open this up and they say, yeah, but I'm going to find out. I'm going to prove that that the Bible is wrong and that there is fallacy in this. And they say, you know what? I can't. And I challenge you to do the same thing. I dare you. Look into it. See if you can find it. So, is your situation right now impossible? Is there a situation right now that you're dealing with that you're like, I don't even know how I can get out of this? Are you thinking that there's something that you're dealing with that may be keeping you up at night, or something that you're dealing with that maybe your parents are going through, or maybe your sibling is going through, and you're like, look at this saying, I don't even know how my family's going to get through this. Or maybe it's a situation where you're like, I don't know how I'm even going to be able to get past this moment. And you're freaked out because in a week you got to do something that you have no idea how you're going to get through. We have all had situations. We've all had things in our lives where we're like, we have no idea how we're going to get past this. And I believe that Sarah's story is a great reminder that God's timing is perfect and that he will come through no matter what. Maybe not the way that you think. Because I'm sure Sarah and Abraham probably thought at this point, they're like, oh, well, maybe God's going to use another way for us to be able to help build a great nation. And they're like, no, you know what? God's like, no, you're going to be pregnant. But I'm going to make you wait until you're 90 years old to do that. He proved it. I think it's important for us to remember this story and remember the story of Sarah and know that the impossible is possible. That it is possible for us to get through it. But I will tell you that one thing I want you to think about is, what are you rushing that you need to have patience with? Because I can almost guarantee you that Sarah at one point, she's like, God, come on, where are you? Your timing is off here. And God's like, just wait. Just wait. The time has not happened yet. Calm down and just wait on me. I believe that there's two things we have to remember about this story tonight. One, God is capable. God is capable to help you get through it. And God's timing is perfect. Your timing is not. So stop sitting here saying, yeah, but God, you haven't done this yet, or God, you haven't helped me with this yet. God's sitting there saying, my time is not yet come. Be patient. And that's very easy for us to say. That's very easy for me to say, but I can tell you I deal with that on a daily basis. I don't want to wait on his timing. I want to do it on mine. So, that's the story. That's the story of Sarah tonight. And I believe that we can all apply it. Heavenly Father, I thank you for tonight. God, I thank you for the story of Sarah and the impact that this story can have on our lives. Simply by looking at it and saying, we don't believe that it is possible for us to be able to get through it. But if we look at Sarah's life, we can say anything is possible. God, I also believe that we need to have patience. That we need to have patience just like Abraham and Sarah. And say, your timing is perfect. And we have to completely rely on you. God, I pray that we give over to you whatever feels impossible tonight. That we would trust in you, that we'd lean on you. Because we know that you are far greater than anything we can achieve for ourselves. You are stronger, and you know better than what we do. And so, God, I pray that you take that control. Allow us to be impacted by you and to be able to see the impossible be possible. In your name I pray. Amen. All right, I'm going to invite the worship